Shabbat Shalom. If you are at all interested in the psychology of society, of how humans organize themselves, you may have come across an interesting study, or at least one that I found fascinating. But then you'll forgive me, I'm a recovering political science major. If you take different policy proposals and you strip off the identity of who proposed it, or the party affiliation of whoever proposed it, and you put it in front of people who affiliate very strongly in a partisan way, either direction, they will, if you tell them that it is a proposal from their party, find that there is very little wrong with it, that it is, in fact, a very good piece of legislation. On the other hand, if you take the same proposal and give it to people with equal party affiliation and tell them that it is from the opposing party, a very high percentage in different studies, over 60%, will tear it apart as being completely unreasonable. Now, it's not only in partisan politics that this phenomenon appears. In general, we are much better at picking apart other people's arguments, showing the flaws in their reasoning, than we are in discovering for ourselves. Especially if what we want to be true is what is under investigation. If we like what we hear, we don't tend to dig much deeper. If we don't like what we hear, then absolutely we will take it to task and usually do a pretty good job of finding out the mistakes. Which is why when we study Judaism, I will often find that the most engaging and passionate conversations I have with students, whether it be about the Torah itself or Jewish points of law, are things that they disagree with. Where people will say, wait a minute, Rabbi, are you trying to tell me ba 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 ba? The things that they have a difficult time swallowing tend to be chewed over a lot more. Whereas the things that are very pleasing or that naturally fit with our self-perception, either personally or communally, those tend to slide right past the smell detector, and we don't think too deeply about them, which is a shame. Because we should think as deeply about the things that we like as the things that we find challenging. Which is why when we come across the passage in this week's Torah portion of Am Segula, we should think very deeply about what it means. Because chances are it doesn't mean what you think it means. Back at the Exodus, God said that he would take us out of the land of Egypt to become his Am Segula, to become his treasured nation, the usual translation. A segula is something that is put aside as a special treasure to someone, used in royal contexts in the other places it appears. And Am, of course, is a nation. Most of us read that, we feel all warm and fuzzy, we say Am Segula, we're God's treasured nation, boy that feels nice. Let's move on to arguing about how to keep kosher because, you know, I'd really like to find a loophole that lets me have that bacon cheeseburger. By the way, it's called fake cheese and fake bacon. It's absolutely possible. But what does Am Segula mean? Does that mean that we are God's one and only pride and joy? That we are the only nation on earth that God cares about? No. We know it doesn't mean that because elsewhere, both within the Torah as well as within the rest of the prophetic works in Tanakh, God says, I care about the entire world. I care about all the other nations and lists many of them explicitly so that we get that picture. Does it mean that we are the best nation, even if God does care about the others? Well, no, because the very next line in this Torah portion, when God tells us that we are his treasured people, he goes on to tell us that we are the least significant people, that we are the smallest of nations. In really the parlance of the ancient world, where numbers was everything, basically saying we were not much. We were kind of pathetic on the world stage in our day. And God says, you're not Am Segula because you're so amazing, because you're so great, because you are so robust. Which leaves us then scratching our head. Well, what does God mean when we are Am Segula then? Well, if he's not saying that it's because we're his only nation that he cares about, if it's not because we are the greatest treasured nation at all, then what is he trying to say? Well, what God is trying to say here is in fact trying to say that God isn't like a human king. You see, for a human king, as we know from the book of Proverbs, having a big nation makes you a big man. Right? It's not only the modern world where people like to throw around big numbers to show how great they are. That's been going on ever since people figured out how to count past 10. People have often used quantity as a substitute for any other measure of quality. And in the ancient world, you were considered a great king if you had a great big kingdom, either in terms of the number of people you had conquered, in terms of the miles that you covered. It was the greatness in the pure material way. God is telling us in this portion that we are not his treasured person because we are so great like that, because God is not a king who would only measure God's greatness through that measure. Instead, we are told that the reason we will be considered good, and by extension, God will be considered great, is because of wisdom, chokhmah. That is going to be the measure. And this is one of the reasons why God is so adamantly opposed to idolatry, which is incredibly corrosive to a society as well as its wisdom. But this is because God is trying to give the world a different measure of what it means to be a worthwhile people, to be a worthwhile individual. Rather than how many elk did you hunt this week, rather than how many people have you defeated in battle, rather than how much gold have you amassed in your storeroom, it is what wisdom are you using to guide your life? And is that actually making your life better? Because if it's not, it really doesn't matter how much gold, how many elks, or how many victims you have defeated. Because that's not really a life that's worth living. So how do we become then an Am Segula? What does this have to do with this treasured notion? Because God is trying to say, you are going to be the prototype. You're going to be the test drive. You're going to be the showroom, the model house in the real estate development. And I started off with Abraham, because I couldn't do it all at once. And even with Abraham, the family was having trouble, kept splitting and fracturing, but we got eventually to have a nation. And all right, guys, now as a nation, here is my wisdom called to the Torah. Hold on to it. Let yourself be guided by it, and you will become known for your great wisdom. And by you being known for your great wisdom, people will ask, how do they get so smart? Why is their life good? Not good by size, because certainly there are religions with a lot more members than us. Not good by power, because despite the anti-Semitic lies, we don't have a whole lot of power really in the world. And not by any other material measure, but your life seems to have an inner blessing. It seems to have a wisdom that is making you do better for yourself inside. Your life has a quality to it that is worthy of emulation. And then we would say, God gave us Torah. We didn't figure this out on our own. Are you crazy? We got the instruction book. Right? God gave us a manual, and we worked very hard, sometimes not hard enough, to actually use the wisdom of Torah to craft a society that would reinforce the goodness within each individual, and each individual worked hard to make sure the society was good. And together we have, for 3,000 years, had a lot of practice. We are the longest continually practiced wisdom tradition in the world. Yes, there are books of ancient wisdom from ancient Egypt, but those were lost, forgotten, ignored. Books from ancient China, again, wisdom that is as old as ours, but wasn't carried forward. It wasn't part of a living tradition that has spanned uninterrupted 3,000 years. And we've got a pretty good track record. 3,000 years. Is this something that is worthwhile? We wouldn't have made it 3,000 years if it weren't. Is this something that holds us together as a people and makes us better than if we were to fly apart in our own separate ways? We wouldn't have made it here for 3,000 years if it didn't. This wisdom is a testament not just to us, however, but a testament to God, of what God wants for the entire world. We are meant to be an example. We are meant to be the showroom, if you will, again. People should look at us and say, you know what? Maybe there is a better way to live. Maybe there is a wisdom in the universe that transcends the raw, brutal materialism that seems to be governing everything. maybe we can do that too. Not become Jewish, as we've never been a proselytizing faith, but maybe we can also connect to God, and maybe we can also find that wisdom. This is the essence of being Am Segula. It is not about feeling ourselves superior to others. It's not about feeling ourselves greater than others. It is about feeling that we have a responsibility to others, and we have a responsibility to God. We are the matchmakers for the world, bringing the world and God closer together by showing what that relationship can look like. It's a big responsibility, but I wouldn't trade it in for anything. Shabbat Shalom.